Today's episode of the Life of Phys Podcast is brought to you by Very Good Presets. All photographers know how saturated and underwhelming the preset market can be. You see some styles you like, you buy that pack of 20 presets, and when you put them on your photo, none of them look like what you expected. Very Good Presets has a different approach to color grading. Rather than a pack of presets, they offer them one at a time with modifiers to help refine that preset to your liking. Each preset has months of focus and calibration to make sure you get an incredible end result. Their film emulations have been used by major brands and artists such as country superstar Luke Combs. Additionally, a growing community of users rally around the brand and its developers to inspire and encourage one another. Very Good Presets strives to be an industry leader in a culture of generosity, giving regularly to organizations that help underserved communities have access to cameras, film, and photography equipment. My personal favorite preset is 1956, but with the recent release of the Portra 800, that may change soon. Check out Very Good Presets at verygoodpresets.com and try one or more of their presets using our discount code, Life of Phys. Welcome to the Life of Phys Podcast. I'm your host, Tyson Martin, and on this episode I have Tom Minty. Tom is a British-born, New Jersey-based photographer who likes to capture candid, everyday moments on the streets and in communities. Tom enjoys capturing the real, authentic, unstaged moments that show the essence of what being human is. Tom believes that photography provides a level of intimacy between the photographer, the subject, and the viewer that helps shrink cultural, racial, and socioeconomic divides. In a world where the individual is more isolated than ever, the camera can help unite people, share truths, and create more understanding in a society that seems to have a hard time finding common ground. Now let's hear a word from our podcast partner and get to the show. The Life of Phys Podcast is lit by HoboLight. HoboLight is on a mission to empower creators to elevate their creativity with lighting kits made to last and built to inspire. These lights are bold, beautiful, and powerful because HoboLight believes that your lights deserve to be seen. To learn more, follow them on Instagram at HoboLite.
Hey Tyson, thanks for having me on. My name is Tom, and Tom Minty. I originally grew up in England, and I've lived in the States now for 20 plus years. I live in New Jersey, and as photography is not my profession. It's I would say, a healthy obsession. And I've been shooting seriously, I don't know, maybe 4 years. But I grew up around cameras. I mean, my parents were heavily into photography, slideshows after vacations. And so, from a very young age, I was definitely around it, given cameras, promoted, to use them. My folks were never ones to say, don't waste film. We were allowed to snap away and kind of, do whatever we wanted. But it was during COVID where I really kind of came to reestablish like a stronger relationship with using a camera. And I was not in a good place. So I work in a retail environment, and I was considered an essential worker. And so not only was I dealing with COVID on a personal level, but I was dealing with it on everybody else's personal level as well, which was difficult.
I feel your pain. I worked in a bicycle shop at that year of COVID.
Oh, yeah?
So I was in essential service as well. And 9-hour lineups, people not understanding that things sold out. It was a rough time. So I'm not sure what you worked in, but I feel your pain.
Yeah. It wasn't great. I mean, look, I was lucky to have a job. The organization I worked for was very supportive of the situation. People who couldn't work for whatever reason got paid. So I've got nothing to complain about there. But the general stress and anxiety of working in that environment kind of took me back to a place that I had not been for a very, very long time. So I quit drinking almost 10 years ago. And that's a pretty significant part of my pre-story, So I grew up in England, drinking as part of the culture there. I grew up around people who were heavy drinkers. It was never really anything that I thought was an issue until later in life. And probably 2005-ish, I realized that although it was on the outside, I looked fine. Like if you knew Tom at work, there wasn't any problem. You know, it was kind of this fun-loving, sort of joking guy. Yeah, I like to party on the weekends, but it was nothing bad. But at home, it was troublesome. And so I made a decision that I had to, get some help. And I did. And fortunately, I haven't picked up a drink since, which is a good thing. But I think I came close around that time in COVID. And my wife kind of saw that I was struggling. And she said, I don't like the direction that you're heading in. You're getting close to spaces that you've taken a long time to get away from. Instead of picking up a drink, why don't you think about picking up a camera again? Because I used to shoot a lot. In fact, my wife was a passionate photographer. That was kind of one of the things that we sort of had in common when we first started dating. I remember in the 90s, like to the 2000s, when there was the switch from film to digital, I remember trying to convince her to go digital, and she would not give up film. And she shot film like for quite a few years afterwards, and eventually she transitioned over to digital. But she said, you occasionally shoot, with your cell phone, but when you go out and get yourself a camera and like start, shooting things you like again. And one of the few things you could do at the time was be outside. And so I started going to car shows with my son. And so I started shooting a lot of automotive stuff. From there, I realized I was more interested in the people than the cars. And then that's how I got where I am right now. I mean, I spend most of my time shooting street in New York City. If I've got a day off from work and I haven't got any other responsibilities, I'm on a train, I'm up to the city, and I'm putting in 20,000 steps.
Because I credit COVID with my transition to becoming a passionate photographer, because I did end up taking a few months off
right
at the beginning of COVID, because we didn't know what was going on. My wife was very worried. Being in the environment I was in, it wasn't going to be a healthy one. So I had the ability to go shoot from sunrise till mid-afternoon every single day for 3 months. And my skill set amplified drastically. I started shooting photos in 2019.
Okay.
That's when I started photography. And I had some shots I thought were cool, but that time to just really focus and put myself into a position where I could capture whatever I wanted every single day really took me to a different level, as far as skill set and as far as my love for this craft. I credit COVID with a lot. Not what most people say.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting when I think when I look back now, there was a lot of hardships. I mean, for me personally, and for many other. I mean, look, my story is not different from any other people's in this world. Yeah, look, have I had some struggles? Did I have a bout of a drinking problem? I sure did. But I was blessed not to lose anything as a result of it, because if you walk into, any AA meeting or NA meeting or any recovery group anywhere, most of the time most of the other people are in there because they've either been court ordered to or the family has left them. I had not gotten to that point. So I am fully aware I am blessed to have not lost anything as a result of the problem I had, and that during COVID, again, I had a stable job. I was very lucky, but I don't think it was until, like the last sort of year or so where I realized how much it had impacted me, and, how important, like starting up, using a camera, more frequently and more seriously, and taking photography for myself, is something that I have to do. I didn't realize how much of an impact it had kind of, had on me from a positive standpoint. COVID was like a marker for that. Yeah, it was created some hardships, but it's brought me to this place now where ultimately I'm better off than I was, yesterday and the day before. And that's because, I've made a decision to make using a camera a more important part of my life. And that manifests for different people in different ways, right? Like I said, I'm not a paid professional. Like, this isn't something I'm doing, to make money. It's an expensive hobby. um, and I'm lucky to have family members that support it, right? And they don't mind, that I'm spending the money on this rather than something else. But yeah, I mean, I feel lucky that I am where I am today, and part of that is this process that we go through.
And that's what's so important. So, for everybody listening, Tom was one of the first people to send me an email, and kind of telling me how much the podcast meant and how it was going to change people and offer advice and possibly change people's lives and maybe even save a life. Tom, I fully appreciate those emails. It's funny how it opened the conversation and now you're on the podcast.
Yeah. I mean, it is. I mean, I think, in this space, right, especially in the photographic space, in the environment we're in, this is something that is needed. I mean, we've seen over the last couple of years, there's been more openness around talking about mental health and creating communities, but I do see that we can do a better job as a photographic community of making sure that we're supporting each other in this area. And, everybody's life is different. Everybody comes from life from a different perspective. I try to, in my daily life, I try to remember that everybody has got stuff going on in their lives, and not just me. And the likelihood is if you were to take 10 people and put them in a room, and everyone was to throw down their problems in the middle, you would probably pick your own problems back up in a heartbeat, as opposed to choosing somebody else's. So the fact that you've created, a space for people like me to have a conversation with you so that maybe this resonates with somebody else. And they then realize that, hey, it's okay to talk about this and go and get some help. That's a good thing. We need to do more of that.
You know what? I appreciate your story. I appreciate what you bring to the table, by letting people know, like, hey, we need to be open. We need to speak about our issues. I'm still learning. I'm still learning to be myself, to allow myself to be out instead of this stereotypical prototype that was created for me throughout the 70s and 80s of my childhood, where we sucked everything up. We kept everything inside until my mid 30s when it all came out in a way that was uncalled for everybody.
Sure.
And it took me a while to realize why I had so much anger and stuff built up in me. But once you start to unravel, it's like Shrek says, I got layers.
Yeah.
But once you start to peel it away, you really start to see, wow, like, I don't even think people realized I went through that. Or, my divorce was horrible. Well, we didn't even get divorced. She ended up passing away. But like our separation, it was awful because I gained my children. I had my children full time, but I lost all my friends.
Right.
And there's nothing more lonely when you're trying to figure out a new aspect of your life with nobody around you.
Yeah, no one there to support you. Yeah, that's definitely difficult. And I think one of the things, like, I was a child of, I was born in 1980, right? So, we touched on this like before we started recording, that there's a certain expectation of, what you are supposed to be. And while my folks were never really they were not harsh in that fashion, culturally, that was the environment I grew up in. Boys don't cry, they don't show their emotions, you don't talk about this stuff. And it took me a long time to even talk publicly about, my alcoholism, right? So if we'd had this conversation maybe 2 years ago, I probably would not have even shared that part of my story, but I'm at a point in life now where really, I don't care, I'm never going to take a day of sobriety for granted, but I think at almost 10 years, unless I do something really stupid, I'm probably good for today, right? So, and sharing that might help somebody else, because I am not the stereotype that falls into that bucket of people. Because I think most people think, hey, if you end up in an AA meeting, then you've got to be sleeping on a park bench, and you've got to be homeless, and your family's left you. But there's plenty of other people out there like me who either might benefit from the help or who've gone through the same thing. So when we talk about this stuff and we put it out there in the public sphere, it enables other people to feel comfortable doing so.
And that's what it's all about. It's about letting people know just to talk. I'm very fortunate now. I have a group of people that if I'm in a situation, one, they'll notice and reach out to me, or I can reach out to them, and we'll talk about anything. Some of my best friends and I, we tell each other we love each other when we hang up. People think that's weird, but no, those are my family.
No, we need to do that. Then there needs to be more love in the world.
100%. The world is so tough this day and age with the cost of living going up drastically. In my household here, we spend $500 a week on groceries.
Yep.
And it's not the $500 a week that I used to get
4
months ago.
Right.
Now it's, if I'm lucky, it's 3/4 of that haul. And that puts strain on us. Property taxes going up. Who knows what the interest rates are going to be? There's all these other thought processes and struggles and strains that you have that when you're mentally not focused on yourself, those can push you over the edge. There's so many people that struggle and stress about how they're going to eat or what's going to happen tomorrow. And they just pile it on and pile it on. But when you have someone to talk to, a lot of that stress that you're feeling and pain that you're feeling can be maybe not taken away, but can be washed down a little bit, and it can be a little bit easier to get through your day. And that's where, building a community. I don't know if people have noticed I've actually stopped using the community over competition hashtag, because to me, competition isn't even in the realm of what I'm talking about.
Right.
So I've kind of shortened it. I'm just here to build a community of photographers, of creatives, of athletes, of people that are here to help listen and share stories to hopefully benefit us all. And social media is such a double-edged sword when it comes to this aspect, because one, you have the gatekeepers. They're my favorite. And then you have the people that just want so badly to be acknowledged by the gatekeepers that they're doing all this weird stuff online, and they're just sad because they're not getting what they want. So that's really not helping their mental health and helping them grow.
Sure.
So if we build a community of people that is everybody from the beginner to a well-established veteran, how cool is it that people can reach out with a picture or a question, and you have a group of 40, 50, 60, 100 people that are like, oh man, that's awesome. What do you need? And they can just, it just rolls that conversation. And when you have conversations, your mentality and your mindset changes drastically. When they're a positive interaction.
Yeah. When it's not conducted through a keyboard or, with a character limit, right? When you're having a face-to-face conversation like we are right now.
Yep.
There's a real need for that. And I think that's where, as creatives, if we do more than, if we do more of this, I think people are thirsty for this type of conversation, right? They want to step away from some drama that's created, on social media. The negative aspects. I mean, look, there are positive aspects of social media, right? It's a way for you to, kind of create like a poster board of your own work. I know some people don't even, they're not interested in the likes or the follower accounts. It's a way for them just to kind of like, post up different pictures and kind of lay things out and see how that, work looks collectively. There are other people that use it, for feedback or as part of the feedback loop that they get from other creatives. But I think people are hungry for a community environment where they can engage face to face and like establish these kind of long-term relationships with other people in the field, right? So, mentorships, that kind of stuff.
So important.
For me personally, over the past, 2 years, that's something I've really focused on because I didn't want to become like isolated, right? If you don't get feedback from other photographers, then, I mean, for me, it's an important part of the growth process, right? I'm interested in, complementing the photos I take with writing, and I am not the best writer. So surrounding myself with people who practice professionally, documentary photographers, photojournalists. Being involved in a community like that is something that I found really beneficial because, they can give you feedback on, pitching stories. Even if you're not going to do it, you learn something from that. You learn how to build out, a narrative for the photographs you've taken, a story that you might be creating just to post on Substack. I mean, I do some of that.
I don't even know what a Substack is.
It's kind of like a blog. But again, it's very community based. There are a lot of other people in creative spaces who write, and they post that material there. And some of it's writing with art, some of it's writing with complemented with photography. You'll find a lot of freelance photojournalists are adopting that platform now as a way to kind of keep record of maybe personal projects that they're not pitching or things that they're working on, and then share with a kind of a larger community to get feedback on. It's a pretty neat group of people, and I came to that through, I don't know if you've ever heard of the Raw Society.
I have, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm a member there as well. And that's where I heard about Substack, because a lot of the folks who are members at Raw use Substack as a means to put out their own personal photojournalism and written work. And so I've been trying to do more of that because I'm very interested in building narratives with my photographs, right? So at first it was about getting the good shot. Now it's about when I go out now, look, I'm not going to lie, I'm looking for the crazy situation that happens on the corner of 42nd and 5th, just like every other street photographer in New York. But I'm also, when I go, I'm also thinking about, okay, how can I tell a story today about the miles that I walked? And I'll often find something, and then that becomes the theme for the day. And that's the work I don't often show, right? Because it takes me longer to build that process out, right? I might find something and then think, hey, I really need to go back to this 2 or 3 times before I'm ready to, come up with an edited set of 5 pictures that I'm going to write some, copy around. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of cool communities out there. And being involved in things like the Raw Society has told me people are thirsty for it, and we can do more when we have positive face-to-face or in-person interactions.
Well, I just subscribed to my first Substack. It is Mr. Tom Minty's.
Yeah, my follower count went up 100% probably as a result.
What a Substack is, because I have no idea. So
yeah,
I'm still learning every day. And you're talking about writing what that picture means and the background and what you feel and all that and the big descriptions. I'm not that. I mean, you've seen my photos. It's sunsets are my jam.
Yeah, that's cool.
I'm straight to the point.
Yeah, you
would really get along with James Rice.
Yeah,
because he's very much about that documenting and that documentary aspect of his images.
Yeah, photography as a document is something that's important to me. And I think it's part of the environment I am. So my wife's entire family are journalists or were journalists. And so I am surrounded by people who tell stories, or, they use photography in conjunction with, writing to report on, a factual event or, provide some editorial writing or whatever. So I think part of it is that. And I'm also, history is something very important to me. And so I think the two go very, very well together when you can use photography and writing to either explain your point of view or an event that happened. I get a lot of enjoyment out of doing that. It's something in the past year or so I've really started to focus more on.
I call myself a street documentarian.
Sure.
Because I love to document what's happening around me. Most people think I'm a landscape photographer because most of my images that get the most response are those moments that people are in bed while I'm there watching the world explode.
Right. Yeah.
Put colors out that are just unbelievable. But my true passion is capturing moments, capturing street moments, being in public as they happen. And you would think that me being loving photojournalism and, documenting what's around me, that I would love the writing aspect. But I haven't been able to get my brain around it.
Yeah, it's not easy. I really struggle with writing. So one, because of my own, I shared this with you earlier, right? I have ADHD, and I didn't get diagnosed that I had that until probably like a year and a half ago. And so, as a kid, the things that were flags for ADHD were not recognized as much in the 80s. And so, I was just a student who didn't apply themselves or didn't study enough. And that's why I couldn't spell properly, or I couldn't remember grammatical rules. And I come to learn now, right? This is actually, these are all things that are part of, my ADHD. And there's things I can do to help improve that situation, but to only to a certain extent. And I was super self-conscious about that, especially living in a family of journalists who are copy editors, right? So, you make one minor grammatical offense and the world is coming to an end. And so I was very afraid to even share some of this stuff. My wife is an attorney as well, so she writes for a living. so there's this self-conscious aspect of not making spelling mistakes or grammatical errors, and that for a long time prevented me from doing it. Now I'm not so concerned anymore. I still have a pretty good staff of editors on hand if I need them. But I go to them first, as opposed to just posting it up and then wishing I'd had them do it beforehand.
You just put a book out on Blurb.
Yeah.
Called With Love from New York.
Yeah.
How was that process? How was it getting that thing together, and how's it doing for you?
Yeah, I mean, that was a really cool experience, right? So, like I said, I've been back into photography sort of heavily for about 4 years, and I've spent probably the last 2.5, 3 years spending most of the time shooting street in New York. I'm lucky to be close by. So although I don't live in the city, I do have family that do. So if I ever need to stay a night, I've got a place that I can stay. But normally I go up for day trips, and I'll go for a full day, and I'll walk, 10, 12 miles, sort of crisscrossing the city. And this was part of like how I realized photography had become a sort of a therapeutic practice to me, because I'd become very cynical, quite candidly, during COVID about the behavior of humanity. What I realized was, when I was on the street taking pictures, it enabled me to kind of drown out all that noise and actually get a better appreciation for, hey, you know what, the world is not such a bad place, right? And that is on display in New York. A lot of people they have this sort of preconceived notion that it's a rough and tumble city, that there's a lot of crime, that it's dirty. And, it's just like any other urban environment. And there are places that you need to be more careful going. And there are places that that are perfectly safe. But one of the things that you realize about New York when you spend any significant time there is that the people are way more welcoming than they are made out to be by the person that goes there once or twice, right? Look, it's a very fast-paced environment. New York moves on from most things very quickly. But I started seeing things like, strangers helping each other on the subway, or, someone would drop their cell phone and a stranger would pick it up and run after them. And these were all things I noticed because I was going deliberately there to photograph. So I built up this body of work. I was just out making street photos. And eventually I kind of said to myself, hey, I should probably do something with this. It's not that I want to finalize my time working on my street photographs in Manhattan, but at least for this last couple of years, let me see what I can do with this body of work. So I started going through it, and there were certain photos, right? There's certain photos that we as photographers, we hold dear to ourselves. But when I started going through all of this work again, I started to notice themes, right? And one of them was this human connection piece, right? The love. And so I said, hey, I think this is something that I can maybe put into a zine. And more than anything else, it was just a practice that I adopted because I wanted to go through the experience of culling a certain set of images down, right, from a larger group, culling again, and then going through the whole sequencing process, like, how I would lay out photographs in a book. Would there be any text there? What would it look like? And I think what I got more than anything else from it is just a better appreciation of who I am as a photographer, right? You start to notice when you're going through thousands and thousands of pictures and you're trying to identify a theme, you start to notice things that maybe from a technical aspect that you've been doing wrong. Or you start to notice things that you're drawn to, and then you start to ask yourself, well, why am I drawn to that particular subject matter every time? Every time I see this thing, I take a picture of it. Why do I do that? And so it really helped me sort of understand myself better. And again, it fed back into this whole sort of discussion that the world it's not all a bad place. There's a lot of good things happening out there. Yeah, I mean, it was cool. I got some help from the folks over at the Raw Society. It's a really, really neat community of people there who have kind of created this wonderful community that is a really broad spectrum of photographers. You've got people like myself who, are passionate hobbyists essentially. And then you've got, working photojournalists and fine art photographers. And to be able to get feedback from all those people is really valuable. Yeah. So it's definitely been something I've enjoyed doing. And I'm not sure I'll go through and do it again anytime soon because I've got projects in mind, but I really like to build up a lot of work in that particular thing I'm interested in and then go through and see whether it works for, for a zine or a book.
It seems like such a crazy process to put it all together.
Yeah.
I look at
it
them.
is. Yeah.
Blurb definitely makes it easy.
Yeah.
The only downfall I have with Blurb is the cost of shipping. They charge me to go to Canada.
Yeah. The shipping to Canada is a little crazy. Well, the shipping anywhere outside of the US is a little bit nuts.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the process of doing it through Blurb was really cool because you can pick all different kinds of layouts, bindings, and then the ability just to order one copy as a test copy. So you can, hey, do I want it on gloss paper, luster paper? Do I want a fabric binding? All of these different things that you don't think about necessarily. If you were just creating a album of family photos from a vacation, I mean, I've got a stack of test prints. So I mean, I must have had maybe 5 or 6 different iterations of this thing before I finally said, okay, I'm ready to hit the button and say we're done. But the process of doing that, because every time you would get a book back and you've got the physical item in your hand, you see, oh man, maybe I should have, maybe this picture doesn't work, right? There's something about having it in print, holding your work or a photo book that presents the work differently to you. Your experience is a lot different. Your consumption experience is a lot different when it's actually a physical item. And that's the part I enjoy the most, right? Is there's a level of gratification of publishing a book and, a few people who you have no idea like it, so they buy it. That's neat, but that was never the reason I did it. The reason I did it was to go through the process of editing or selection and then sequencing and then getting feedback from other people who, I trust to give me some candid feedback about how to, better put together and sequence a book. That's the most value I got out of it, and that and learning more about myself as a photographer, I think.
It's crazy to think that all the effort you put out and it just shows up in people's hands. All they have to do is click that little button and it's there.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that the funny thing is, right, is that even as photographers, even if we are super engaged in the world of photography and we buy a lot of photo books, right? We got a lot of monographs on our bookshelves. There's still this initial wow, how did this person, Eggleston, Frank, how did they produce all of these fantastic images? You get to see all the bangers. What you don't get to see is these thousands of rolls of negatives that they said exactly just like you and I did. Man, this is trash. How on earth? I'm never going to get this thing done, right? We get to see the gems. We don't get to see all the floor cuttings, the throwaways. And that's an important part. That, doing this thing reminded me of that. Just because some of these, legendary photographs we see, we assume that that's every time that person picks up a camera. Or the reality is it's not. in many regards, they're just like you and I. That, there's going to be a lot of failure before the good one.
Yeah. Vivian Meyer's a perfect example of that.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, look at how many thousands of undeveloped rolls of film.
Well, yeah, and for years as well. The fact that we didn't even know about her work, right? And then it gets discovered in a shoebox in an attic. And that when we find stuff like that, it's incredible. That's happening right now as well, right?
Yes.
And I think that's the other thing we don't realize is that there are a lot of people out there that we don't know, right? And we assume, everybody who's taking pictures is posting to Instagram or Threads or other social media, but there's many of the people that I spend time talking to about photography are not utilizing those social media platforms in the way that many others are, right? So they're focused on producing the work.
Yeah, I was listening to a podcast recently. The guest said not using social media to find work, and his best work came through recommendations of other people.
Right.
It's so crazy to think, like, nowadays you think everything has to be out there on social media because that's how you're going to find things. But there's this whole group of photographers that are behind the scenes that don't use social media.
Yeah.
They don't do any of that stuff. So yeah, it's neat how they just kind of build the whole thing without having that social presence. They rely on their website and word of mouth to create business.
Yeah, well, I mean, Gary Winogrand didn't have social media, did he? Right. So, people like him, John Meyerowitz, although, John Meyerowitz is still a contemporary photographer and he is actually pretty active on social media. But, his body of work, the stuff that we are looking at today, was created at a time where all he did was go out and take pictures, and commune with other photographers and show each other their work and have discussions about what was good, what was not good, why it worked, why it didn't work. And unfortunately, I think some of that's been lost today, right? We don't have that. We don't have that platform. Which is why there's a craving for it, which is why now we're starting to see a resurgence of some of this stuff.
If you're ever in Soho on the weekends in the summer, you can go say hi to Rob Han. He'll be selling his prints at his table.
After I listened to
that,
and here's crazy thing. I spend a lot of time in the city, and I did not know his work. But then I look at it, and I'm like, man, every other photographer who's taking pictures of the Southwest and posting them on Instagram now has this guy to thank, who's been doing it for 30 years, right?
Yeah.
So,
and he still shoots it all film, no digital.
All film, yeah. That was a neat episode, yeah.
Yeah, he was fun too. So I had. As far as age category, I mean, he's 70 and James is 71.
Right.
And they have such cool stories.
Yeah.
Right. From James's tragic story to finding redemption and finding the camera again to Rob's, like, letting it out of the bag. He was a male model and he started shooting men's models because his girlfriend was jealous.
Right.
Go shoot. Yeah. Don't shoot the women.
Don't shoot the female models. Yeah, that was funny.
And the fact that he had stuff up in prestigious galleries and chose to sell prints on the street.
Right.
And he still does it to this day, every summer in Soho.
Yeah, the next time I think I'm actually probably going to be going to the city on, I don't know, maybe Wednesday or Thursday. I got a day off work, and my kids are heavily involved in like an arts ministry at the church I go to, as is my wife. And I get roped into certain things. Like, I don't know if you saw I posted recently, like, my wife dragged me down there so that I could get, headshots of all the kids for the cast photographs.
Yeah.
Which was fun. A lot of that stuff is going on this weekend. So if I'm at home on the weekend, normally I'm spending time with my wife and kids. And then I use my days off if I'm off in a week where everyone's either at school or at work, then it doesn't chew into my family time if I go spend the entire day out, photographing.
Yeah. And enjoying the city.
Yeah. Yeah. So if I go up on a Wednesday, I may, I'm often in the Soho area. Normally I get the train in, I get into Penn Station, and then I go all the way south on the subway until, like Chinatown, basically. And then I just kind of walk myself north until I get too tired and then get back on the train.
it's nice to have that train access.
Yeah, we're very lucky to have that. Although last time I was there was an accident on the New Jersey Transit line, which then prevented all trains getting in and out of Penn Station from Secaucus, Secaucus Junction is like sort of a main thoroughfare across from the island.
Okay.
And I will often drive there because it's an hour and then it's 10 minutes on the train, right? As opposed to driving into the city, trying to find parking, the cost of parking. And then I've got a car close by. Well, the problem is you're reliant on the train from Manhattan to Secaucus. And there was an accident on the New Jersey side that put a power line across the train tracks, and all of the trains were canceled. So my car is in Secaucus and I am in Manhattan, and there is no easy way to get to and from if you don't have a vehicle. You got to get a cab, an Uber, or you've got to go and get the ferry or the bus from the Port Authority, or the ferry across to Hoboken, and then an Uber north. So I ended up having to get a cab. It cost me like $100 to drive 8 minutes.
Oh,
but I had no choice. My car's in my car's on one side of the river, and I was on the other side.
Yeah, you had no choice but to do it. So, wow. I couldn't even imagine. I mean, that's what Rob was saying too. He just loads all his stuff on the train.
Yeah.
Pops over, does it all that way. It's the same way he's been doing it for forever.
Depending on what type of photography you're into, you can travel very lightly as well. Like, this time of year, I just take a wallet and my camera and a pocket full of film. I don't even take a camera bag, because if I need water, I can buy it from, a newsstand. If I need something to eat, I can buy it from a food vendor. And I'm not generally worried about the rain, so I don't need a jacket or anything like that. I mean, I'm wearing shorts and T-shirts and a camera, basically, this time of year, which makes it very accessible. You don't need to drag a whole bunch of stuff around all day.
Yeah, exactly. It's easier, too. You can travel light. Camera bags draw attention.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? So the least amount of attention drawn, the better.
Yeah, I mean, in New York, that's generally not a huge problem.
I guess, yeah. There's so many people.
It's so dense in population, and the vast majority of people are just trying to get from A to B. So, when I think about all the time I am not nearly there as much as what I would consider the core group of contemporary street photographers who, they either live in the city or very close, and they are shooting 5-6 days a week, multiple hours a day, right? So, I mean, I'm still putting in a reasonable amount of time, right? But nothing compared to the core group of people that are out shooting on the street. But the vast majority of people there, they don't care about you taking a picture. I mean, yeah, you hear the story. I've had a couple of confrontations. Most of the time, it's people who you are not taking pictures of that actually come up and approach you. Like, why are you taking that person's picture? You can't do that. And very rarely is it the person you take a picture of, in my experience, that you have a problem with. And I'm not discreet. I don't hide the fact that I'm using a camera, because I think that that's the best for me. That's the best way.
Yeah, that's what works for you.
Yeah. Amazing.
So, Tom, what's your thought process on the connection between creativity and your mental health?
Oh, huge. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, and photography has definitely pulled me out of a very, very dark place, right? So, like I said, I was at that point during COVID, and I needed something to help me reconnect with the good side of humanity, and the camera was it, right? All the noise of life disappears when I'm out on the street shooting. All of it. I could be stressing out about something on the ride up into the city, but the moment I step out onto the street and I lift that camera to my eye for the first time, it just disappears. It goes away. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is about the frame lines, the viewfinder, that kind of just sort of, it makes you feel isolated in a way, or at least for me. But at the same time, you're connected, right? Because there's something very personal about taking someone's picture, whether it be, a portrait with consent, or whether it be, a random scene on the street that you just saw and you liked something about it and you took. But yeah, I mean, I'm going to credit it to, it kept me sober. It was that important because I was not in a good space.
Oh, I couldn't even imagine what it would have been like during COVID in New York City. I mean, I only knew what was happening because I saw it on the news, right? But I had friends that he was from here, but his company relocated him to New York. And he was saying like it's bad. Like this is a really, really bad scenario.
Yeah, I mean, I had family who and still have family that live in Manhattan, and so they were there during that. And it was difficult because you could not leave your apartment. Only for certain circumstances. And if you live in Manhattan, I mean, and I don't, but I'm fortunate enough to be close by and to be very familiar with the city. But if you live there, you have to be a certain kind of person, right? And you have to be okay living in a very densely populated place that is constantly moving. There is always something going on. There is always street noise. It doesn't matter what time of the day. And just to have that taken away, and all of a sudden you're living in this environment where you can't step out of, your small city apartment. And when you do, there is nobody there. I can't imagine that would have been difficult. I was lucky that I had the space. I mean, well, some people would not call it rural, but I mean, if you live in New Jersey and you're from New Jersey, where I live is rural New Jersey. So, I've got an acre of land and a lot of trees. So that's rural for most New Jerseyans.
Yeah, nice. I live in a small town outside of Vancouver, BC.
Right.
And I mean, most people don't realize the population of Canada is less than the population of the state of California. The whole country.
Yeah.
So we have a really busy little part of where I live. It's called Fort Langley. It's the birthplace of British Columbia.
Sure.
And it's usually weekends. It's jammed with tourists. Busy, 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 busy. And I have photos of it from 11 o'clock in the morning during COVID where there is nobody on the street. No cars, no people, just me and my camera.
Yeah.
And it's pretty eerie, but I'm very grateful I got to capture, hopefully a once in a lifetime situation to document that moment.
Some of the work from any of the major cities, throughout the world. I mean, I grew up in England. And so if you look at some of the pictures taken by photographers of London during COVID, I mean, the place was desolate. It's like you can't, we're so used to seeing those places alive with hundreds of thousands of people all the time that to contemplate what it would be like with nobody there was hard for us to fathom, I think,
Yeah, I couldn't, again, I live in a town that when I think it's busy, it's not even close to a normal day in New York City.
Right.
But yeah, it was weird. You would leave and you just walk and it was eerie quiet. There's no noise from anyone. There's nobody around. Just this. It's so hard to describe, but I mean, we all felt it in our own city.
Oh, yeah, we definitely did. I mean, the sound was something I noticed even where I live, right? So I'm about an hour from Newark Airport, about an hour and 15 minutes from Philadelphia, 2 hours from JFK. I'm surrounded by like three of the largest airports in the country, the busiest airports in the country, at least. And so to not have that air traffic, even where I live residentially, you noticed that you didn't hear the sound of cars on the highway in the morning or in the evening. It was strange.
One thing we never want to see again in this lifetime.
Yeah, I hear you.
You got any other projects you're working on? Something that people can look forward to seeing coming up?
So nothing like close to the end, right? So I'm always kind of sort of thinking about like, I guess I'm a collector, right? So I'll start to see, maybe I'll see something when I'm out photographing, and then I see it a bunch of times and I think, hey, maybe I can build a body of work around this particular theme or this particular sort of random thing I found on the street. Like one of the things that I've recently, I don't know how I even got attracted to this, but if you walk through any of the sort of the areas in Manhattan where there are storefronts, and they're in abundance. Like if you walk through Chinatown, right? So a lot of them have got, these pull down metal facades that, they will lock during the night or when the store is closed. And I started noticing not just the graffiti that's on those, but they'd have the padlocks, and people would put like weird stickers on them. So I started photographing the padlocks. So I do random things like that, and then think, hey, maybe this could be something later, or it could be part of something. So I've always got some random collection of photos going on. There are other things that I want to sort of dig into deeper, and I think one of the main reasons that you and I connected was over the mental health thing. And so, I'm thinking about that. I'm also thinking about, hey, I'm about to celebrate a 10-year sobriety milestone here. There's something there for me, right? So I've started to take photographs that are of more personal nature, more family oriented, that are in that realm of what it's like to live with mental health issues and struggles. What is it like to be in a family where people struggle with that? And so that's deeply personal, but it's something that, I think, over a number of years you could create something that would be valuable, at least to me, but maybe helpful to other people. I have kind of like this thing on my phone, right? I have I use the Tasks app, and anytime I get an idea of a project, boom, I put it in there. And some of them don't pan out, and some of them are just ongoing, or some of them won't start for a year. But more and more, my work, I'm drawn to people-based, long-term work, right? So, the ideas I'm coming up with are going to have to involve not just the photography and the writing, but establishing relationships with people, gaining access, to certain situations or certain communities. Because I think there's a lot of things, you don't have to travel far. Like, I don't have to get on the train every day and go up to the city to take cool pictures. I can do some of these things locally. The Pine Barrens in New Jersey is a very interesting, geographically, it's a very interesting location, but also some of the communities that live within the Pine Barrens got really interesting backstories. And there's a lot of kind of sort of interesting history around cranberry farmers, that kind of stuff. So I'm thinking about maybe doing something like that. And I started work on one of those projects recently. So there's always something going on, right? But sometimes I think it's just really freeing to just go out and take pictures.
Yeah.
If you've got half an hour at the end of the day and the light's nice, like I was driving to work earlier than normal the other day, and there is this old abandoned fiberglass workshop on a street that is on my way to work. And I've taken pictures of it before because it's kind of like this sort of old dilapidated, it's got this urban decay vibe to it. And I like that stuff as well. In the last time that I had driven by there, the exterior fence that was around it was up, and someone had torn the fence down, and someone had thrown stones through one of the exterior windows. And during the time that I was driving there, the light was coming through a collapsed part of the roof and was shining through this window. And it just looked, I was like, all right, what time is it? The next time I drive past here at 7:50 in the morning, I got to stop with my camera and take a picture of some of this stuff. So sometimes just doing that is all I need to, kind of get out of my own headspace. I don't have to have a project. For me, projects are part of the process, but just going out and taking pictures is just as important. Just the act of getting yourself out of your own head and watching other people's lives happen in front of you is valuable to me.
Speaking of cameras, what do you shoot with?
The gear question. Yeah, right. So
we'll try to keep it brief.
Yeah, we'll keep it brief. No, I have no problem talking about gear. I think, gear is part of is part of the hobby. And so, I mean, I've used a bunch of different systems, right? So, when I first started taking photographs a long time ago, when I was a kid, it was, little Kodak point and shoots, 110 film cameras. Remember the 110 film canisters? Right. So, I mean, I think that was my first camera. And then, a series of 35mm point and shoots. I know at some point my family had an Olympus OM1, which, my dad would rarely let the kids touch, but, we would take pictures with that as well. But as far as my own like my current gear. I'm primarily into to analog right now, right? So I have a digital camera. I've got an X Pro 3. That was actually like the first camera I bought when I got back into shooting. And the primary reason I bought it is I was looking for something that reminded me of that old Olympus OM1 that I had access to when I was a kid, because I'm very tactile. I like the dials. I'm not a menu person, right? If you gave me a Sony, I'd probably have an anxiety attack, because the autofocus and the color science on those cameras is incredible, but the menus are a little overwhelming to me. So I like something that's very tactile, and I can see by turning a knob or pressing in a button, this is what's gonna happen. The X Pro 3 kind of fit that vibe. So with that, if I'm shooting digital, I've got an 18-55 zoom. So that would be like my, hey, I'm going to throw this in the car because I think I might take pictures today kind of camera, right? And then I've got the 35mm equivalent for that. I think it's a 23 prime, the f2, which is a nice lens. But I don't use that as much these days, right? I use it to scan film more than anything else, which is kind of funny. From the film perspective, I've got a couple of different cameras. I've got like a little point and shoot Olympus XA, which is kind of like a little tiny manual rangefinder. And I'll throw that in my pocket if I'm just going out and I've got like half a roll in there, or I'll give it to my kids, right? Because my son has sort of taken an interest. He thinks it's kind of cool that you don't just, stick a memory card in a computer, right? That you expose the film, and then you've got to develop the film, because we do all the developing at home. So we got that. But my primary is my Leica M6, right? So, I tried a bunch of different cameras before I started using that. And there is something just about the simplicity of it, right? I know if I take a bad picture with that, it is my fault. It isn't the camera's, right? Because there's only I don't get to change the ISO, really, right? That the film's telling me what the ISO is, unless I want to push or pull, or over or underexpose. So it's aperture or shutter speed and focus. For me, that's about as complicated as I need it. And on that, I'm either shooting with a 28mm lens, or I've really fallen in love with this 40mm, the Voigtlander 40mm. It's kind of this like neat sort of bridge between a 35 and a 50. It's not as tight as a 50. Some of the other character aspects that you might get with a 50, like you can get nice background separation. So if you wanted to, you've got enough width to be able to shoot in a busy street with it, which I think is often the problem with the 50. Sometimes it's a little bit too isolated. But you have the width because it's closer to a 35, but you also have the benefit of having the background separation that you often start to get once you get back into those longer prime, focal lengths. So, that's really what I'm using most of the time is my M6. I love that camera, man. There's something special about it. There is a reason that people like those. It isn't for everybody, but it is like stripped down, basic, light meter, f-stop, shutter speed. I don't want it any more complicated than that.
That's why I like the Q so much. The Q's so stripped down.
Yeah. You have the benefit of the autofocus on the Q, right? Yeah, the autofocus is nice as well.
I shoot Fuji for the same reason. I like the dials. The X Pro 2 is probably my favorite camera I've ever owned. Yeah.
And that was, it was interesting, right? Because I think a lot of people transition from the X Pro if they're like, oh man, now I feel like I've at least got to try this Leica thing. Because it's the rangefinder experience is and I really like the rangefinder. I like being able to see things that are coming into my frame. That's one of the things I like about, using either the optical viewfinder on the X Pro or or with the frame lines on the M6, is that you get to anticipate a little bit more what's going to come into the frame on the camera. The other thing I just picked up, which is a Fuji GW690 Have you seen that? Yeah, that thing's a beast. The cost per frame is a little bit frightening, but it takes some pretty beautiful pictures. It's also not the best camera for discrete street photography because it's a bit of a beast. But I've taken it to the city a couple of times. It's fairly capable of like managing those. Like if you wanted to get like a nice, like architectural shot, or like, you're stepping back a little bit. it's cool for stuff like that. The resolution you get on those negatives is something else. It's pretty special when you can like really, zoom in. If you want to crop, you've got a bit more wiggle room to do so because you lose a bit of that with film. But yeah, I mean, I'm predominantly analog these days.
A lot of people are shooting strictly film right now.
Yeah,
and it's neat to see. I mean, I have a Hasselblad 500.
Oh, nice.
It's had the same roll of film in it for as long as I can remember. Just one of those things. It's one of those cameras that it terrifies me.
Yeah,
I don't know why. Once I get some better weather, I'll definitely get it out and make some magic with it. But it's just one of those things. It's one of those weird. It's a mental block that I haven't got past.
Right.
But I mean, I didn't grow up shooting film. I had I knew digital. That's where I started. So it's always been that way for me. It's just shoot what I know, and that's digital. So I'm going to push it and see what I can do.
Digital is very powerful, right? And some people jump back into the film process and they don't like it. Some people do. There's this sort of nostalgic feel for me. It reminds me of like, taking family pictures and stuff when I was a kid, which is, something I enjoyed. But it's more than that. It is one step in the process of getting to the end product, which is the printed image. Like I got to take the picture and I got to expose it right. I've got to develop the film correctly. I've got to scan the film, or, I haven't spent any time in a dark room, like a traditional dark room, which is something I'm thinking about like doing next. That would be kind of cool to actually wet print some of the photo I've taken. But, all of that to me is part of the process, and it's part of why, I get as much joy from developing and scanning film as I do when I'm out taking pictures. It's all part of it for me. Part of the reason I now shoot a lot more film than I do digital is that, again, it just eliminates some of the steps where, knowing my own mind, I spend a lot of time overthinking, right? So if I take a digital camera up to the city for the day, I come back with a ridiculous number of pictures because I have the ability to press the shutter unlimited number of times. Even if I try to discipline myself, right, I still do that. I can't help it. So then I spend all this time culling all the bad images, and then I have to spend time processing the ones I like. And with film, some of that is done for me. Like the preset for Portrait 400 is Portrait 400. All I have to worry about is scanning it with the correct white balance and converting the negative, and 90% of the work is done for me. So it gives me the time that I was spending stressing about getting all the colors right in Lightroom on my digital photographs if I was shooting color. I'm still spending it somewhere, yes, because I have to develop the negatives and I have to scan the film. But I find that process more enjoyable than worrying about whether I've got the colors right and stuff like that. The film takes care of that part.
Exactly. Well, I think we've got more than enough.
Cool.
Any final words? Let the people know where they can find you.
No final words other than, if you are somebody out there in the community that is struggling with mental health or has something they feel they need to, get off their chest, my message box is open. You can get me on social media. My social media, I'm assuming you put this in the show notes, right?
I will, yeah.
My Instagram handle is unplugged photo, but it's spelt weird. It's UNPLUGD. My profiles are public, so anybody who follows me can message me. And so if you're in a situation where you feel like you need to just reach out to someone because you're having a hard time, my DM box is open for those people, because there have been times in my life where I've had people say that to me, and maybe it was 6 months after they said it, and then I was having a hard time with something, and I reached out, and they were there to support me. So it's part of paying it forward to the next person that needs it.
Exactly.
And just to thank you, man. Thanks for giving me an opportunity to tell my story. And, anytime I can get to sit down and have an active conversation with another photographer is a good thing, right? I think it's neat that we're able to, we're on opposite sides of the country, and we can have a conversation about something we're passionate about. And hopefully, as a result of that, other people will take something away from it. So I appreciate that you've given, me a platform to talk about how important photography is to me.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Tom. Our inbox is always open as well at the Life of Phys. So same thing goes here. Anytime anybody needs anything, just reach out. We'll do our best to get back to you and just give you an ear. Thanks, Tom. Thanks for coming on, sharing your story. And I look forward to getting to know you and watching you continue to put out amazing photos and build these cool projects. You can get Tom's book on Blurb. It's called With Love from New York. Help him out. Buy a copy. Make things happen.
Yeah, it'll offset the cost of film.
Yeah. Maybe.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I know. Yeah. I shoot the most expensive black and white film there is out there. I have this knack for buying color film and then converting everything to black and white because I prefer it. So, I'll shoot a roll of Portra 800, which is, I think, $17 or $18. And then in Lightroom, I'm like, oh man, this looks better in black and white. So, I could have shot, Kempmere 400 for $5 a roll, but I decided to put Portra 800 in and turn it to black and white.
Happens to the best of us.
Yeah.
All right, Tom, well, enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah, you too. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Life of Phys podcast. I hope you've enjoyed our show, and don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. Your feedback helps us continue to bring you content and the stories of our incredible guests. And remember to stay connected with us on all social media platforms. It's at LIFE_OF_PHYS or on the internet at www.lifeofphys.com. Thank you for tuning in and have a great day.